I think it just needs review. I'm not sure it's ever been reviewed. So just push notification server, some updates on before we were using a single entry for each device, for all the devices you had, and now we use different entries for each device you have. And that makes basically no difference, it's just a bit simpler. And I think using a favorite key is just not using your identity key to query the push notification server. And that's all. I think that's everything in everyone. I mean, it's only iOS really, but for anyone who's to be mentioned already in the PR.
Yeah, I will. I will look at it. Yeah, yeah. Let's quickly finish. So this one, I did write it, but I need to review it again myself. I know it's been amended. Oh, and you sent me a message 3 weeks ago. Let's have a look. So as far as I'm aware, so I think Andrea made a change to this, and I think it's basically pretty much is ready for merging. Really, it's already in production, this functionality. Who else needs to review this? So I believe Andrea will not be able to give an approval because he's now co-author. So anybody that's in core, Rajiv has given comments but has not actually approved or unapproved. So again, just need somebody to read this and then we can merge it. It's effectively ready. In fact, it might need a change because this is a draft, but it's in production, so we might as well fold this into the stable specs. They can do. I mean, the spec doesn't say very much. It's a very small, very light, basically an amendment. It just adds an additional payload type. So anybody that understands payloads should be able to give a review.
Well, this spec is mostly about the protocol payload. So I think the people who are mostly working with the protocol should review it, because it's not about the how clients work with status go, but how the status go works with the protocol.
Yeah, well, Oscar. Oh, sorry, Andrea.
No, here I was just mentioning the same, or Andre as well. They started working on protocols, but we're understanding now.
That is true.
We need more changes. I mean, and they're already implemented. So.
Sorry, yeah, that's right. I know Andre is working. Andre with a Y is working on invite notification. Sorry, invites next expansion on the private groups. So that code is in review at the moment, but I haven't seen any specs for that yet. So my presumption is that that would be forthcoming at some point fairly soon. Yes, correct. Yes, that's right.
So another reason would be performance, because, they mentioned performance. Just a clarification. So basically is the passing of the message. So what we want to do is there's going to be an autocomplete, and that autocomplete will basically client side, so not status code, replace dimensions. But also we want to say if you don't use the autocomplete, and for example, you just write at, but you don't actually click on the autocomplete, we want that message to be passed as an extra step, just to make sure that we catch all the dimensions. That's what we were actually talking about. I believe Roman has a bit more context. Yeah, and so whether we want to have the same behavior in desktop, we don't want to have the same behavior in desktop, whether we want to have the code in desktop. And the main reasons are reuse, code reuse, and performance. Code reuse to me is more important.
details where you are mentioning?
So say that we don't have this thing that we need to repass the text just to make sure. Is that what you're saying? Not really. I mean, also because it's like very tied to UI logic, probably. So that I wouldn't say, if you don't want to handle the case where someone would literally type dimension without using autocomplete, I think performance are not an issue. I'm not even sure that performance are an issue. That's something we need to check.
Guys, do you hear me? This was only when we say performance, that's after clicking send message, there will be some computation which might take some time. It's only about sending the message. It's not about suggestions, autocomplete and stuff like this. That's only about performance when we press this send button. And I doubt that it will be really noticeable for the user, the way how it is implemented right now. This is rather the problem of where we put this code, and if you want to use it on in another implementation, another client. Anyway, we would need to rewrite it again because it is already written in ColorScript. It's not like we will save anything if we write it in status go right now, because another problem which we have is that as I took this task after Eric, and he already worked on this on PostgreScript side, I did not even I didn't think about this, that we want to have it on status go. This is probably, this problem should have been discussed before all this stuff as requirements of this task, because there was no requirements, so there was no, it looks so for me, there was no discussion about where the code should be placed, and that's the problem now. I don't know why this question arises today, not like 2 months ago, because it would make much more sense. My opinion is that we only need to just say, yep, we want to move it right now to status go, or no, we are fine with Closure and just finish, and we just finish suggestions and autocomplete on client side, mobile client side. The question was whether this is already implemented or is work in progress for desktop team. I don't know if there is anyone from desktop team who could answer this question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Are you already working on mentions in your clients or not?
Yeah,
Mentions
we
of
actually,
people, yeah.
yeah, we actually already we have an implementation of mentions in place. So
Okay, so then
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it works. You have autocomplete, you have all this stuff, and you can mention someone, and that mention will be replaced with public key and properly sent in the message. Correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, then there is no point in moving this to status go right now because it's already implemented on desktop side. Well, there is a point because yeah.
No, just a clarification. We're talking about a specific feature of mentions here. Sorry, my son is to be unhappy. So is to replace, if you don't use the autocomplete, right? Is it not that was mentioned? If you don't use the autocomplete and you just type at 3 random word names, that is going to get replaced. So that's only what's valuable to put in status go, not the rest, because the rest is very much UI focused, and just getting a complete list.
Yeah, but also probably the whole list of contacts which you can mention in this specific chat probably can be part of the thing and status go. The reason why I say so, because if you do not press on autocomplete, you would need to get this list anyway on status go side, and if it will be different list on status go and on client, it might be a problem. Those implementations should be consistent. Do you understand what I mean, Andrea?
Yeah, so I don't know. It's hard to say. For me, like, if we are gonna have this behavior still worth considering putting status go, unless desktop has it, that's the question I would ask, like to desktop, because to me, like, we're talking about this specific feature. If I write at something without using the autocomplete, does these mention get replaced automatically or no? Because it's sort of like a subset of a feature. Like, I'm not too bothered about the autocomplete list, because it's very easy for a client to actually create one. Rather than one part.
What I mean is that if we like when we have autocomplete, we suggest names which can be replaced with public keys later. And if, for instance, we suggest some name which won't be recognized on status go side later and will not be parsed after sending the message, it's a problem, right? But right now, I thought of implementation where we replace mentions with public keys only after sending the message. So regardless if you click on autocomplete or not, we do not replace anything, because, well, it actually doesn't make sense if you do this afterwards anyway. Well, that's probably details which we can discuss somewhere else. I'm not sure that it is relevant. I think the only relevant question is whether we want to move it to status go right now. And I still don't have a clear answer to that. so I suggest we don't.
Yeah, I at this point, it seems like we're not going anywhere really with with the discussions. I think it's probably best just to park it, and then if it needs to be status go, we can take it later, since desktop has already worked in implementation.
I agree.
Yes, that sounds good to me.
So I explored some options. We developed some specs, but essentially with profile pictures, the main problem seemed to always boil down to bandwidth. To distribute a profile picture via Waku is really the only safe way to do it. You can't do it via ENS really, because ENS will point you to some other payload, and that other payload may be the raw data of an image, but more likely it will be a link to a file on a server somewhere. And the problem with that is that you will basically be exposing your IP. So any status client that wants to get that ENS avatar has to ping a server. And basically, whenever you do that, that means that particular device is exposing, unless it's using maybe a VPN or something like that. But we don't want to have to rely on that being the case. We want it to be secure. So we had some other discussions, had a version 2 specification, and basically we came to the conclusion that profile images, while sort of feasible, you would basically need to download a lot of data to make it work. So maybe if you're using a Wi-Fi connection, it probably might not be too much of a problem, but it could be a problem if you're using mobile data. So the Swarm came up. I'm not even certain who came up with the idea. I know it wasn't me, but it was avatars. Basically, you predefine an image avatar. So it'd be something along the line of Bitmojis. Maciej shared some examples. There's actually a document that's currently on the go at the moment. If I can share that in the chat. So this is one of the documents, not the specification documents that we're working on. This is a new document that Maciej has presented today. Basically, just talking through how we want to make these avatars work. It's basically the solution to profile images in a way that is bandwidth sensitive. So what would happen is you would compose your own avatar from base components. Things like you would choose your species or race, so that, like, whether you're going to be a dog or a cat or a unicorn or a poo emoji, and then, but if you want to represent as human, then choose human, and then you would choose things like skin color and hair color, facial expression, things like that. And so each of these elements would probably be able to be identified with an integer. So a full avatar could be maybe a few bytes in size, and so that could actually be attached to each message. So any message that you send could have this identity avatar associated with it, and I think that's as far as we've got. Although I know Andrea and Andre are also on the call as well, and they've been involved in that. So I probably missed some things. So I'd be happy for them to fill in anything that I've not covered.
It's all clear.
Yeah, I like the name actually. I think that's something Maciej came up with. So final argument hasn't been documented. I I intend to write a document, well, not a document, just a justification for why the first sets of specifications were not acceptable. Probably maybe can use that as an addendum to the rationale for the profile puppets avatar idea should be favored. And I think it works fine with what marketing was saying as well, because marketing said that users want a way to choose their own identity, but it does not necessarily has to be a profile picture. And I think this would be a good compromise. And I think that this is something Andreas said actually in chat, but he said that it could be something that people, it's a USP basically. It's something that people kind of think, oh, that's the status thing. And I think Maciej has a concept that hasn't been materialized yet, but if we can have some sort of iconic or at least stylistically distinct sort of avatars that we could create a brand around that while not necessarily being like status branded, they would have a style that is unique to status avatars. And appealing enough that they in themselves could be at least some motivation for people to also use the app, depending on how we implement it. So to my knowledge, the other things in terms of representing yourself actually have also been discussed in the Swarm, but it's more related to, so we have ENS, which is a name that you give to yourself. In terms of self-representation, this display name is also the thing that has been discussed. We haven't gone down too much down the road of exploring that, and most of what we've been looking at is how we can get this sort of graphical representation across. I think avatars was basically the next solution that was proposed after profile images. So I don't know if that really constitutes an exhaustive discussion of this topic, but I don't know. I think it's a good idea, and I think it could really work. So the short answer is no, I don't think so. But maybe we could have that conversation to see if there's anything else that anybody is aware that has been proposed.
Just my 2 cents. That just sounds like taking what people want and replacing it with something that people didn't ask for, just because we think it's, I don't know, simpler or easier to implement. I'm pretty sure many people just look at those avatars and say, "What? I just want a picture. What is this?" But I mean, it's a cute solution, but it might not be what people want.
Yeah, so I think this is the purpose of the stage that we're at currently. So we're writing up a proposals, sort of rough specification guide for what we're wanting to do. So in the conversations that we've had, the intent has been that we'll get so far with developing a sort of rough outline of how we envisage it, and then kick it back to marketing, kick it back to the community, and basically say, so profile images are a thing that you want, but they're not realistic. How is this for a solution? So that's the intent of this stage that we're currently at the moment. But it's a valid point. People have asked for profile images, and they're not going to get them. They're going to get something else.
Yeah, but that's fair. I think it's just we have to be clear about what are the pros and cons of doing the other solutions. So if people say, yeah, I'm fine with, for example, more bandwidth if I can have normal pictures, yeah, as their choice, I guess, right?
Yeah. So we basically, I was quite a proponent of profile images, but the main issue that we came upon was that you need to be able to have the user decide. So like you said, if the user is happy with high bandwidth use, then our version 2 specification would probably work fine. Actually, 2.5 would be fine, where you download a profile image for everybody that you come into contact with that has a profile image. But the thing is, they would then need to do that. You need to go into a setting. So for tech-savvy individuals like ourselves, that's not a problem. But we would be adding more intricacy to the settings, basically. So I don't know if that. Yeah, I don't know if it adds too much complexity, but we're basically adding a setting specifically for profile images. And so for me, I felt that was probably rationale enough to stop pursuing profile images. Although personally, I felt like an option in the settings would be not too much of a burden. That's from my own perspective. It probably would be too much of a burden for other users to have to say whether or not they want to download profile images, or whether they want to download profile images only on Wi-Fi, or also use their mobile. So I think for simplicity's sake,
yeah, Gary, people don't want to think too much about something as simple as an avatar. Right?
Yeah.
That's true.
But I was just going to say, but I appreciate some pushback to make us to challenge our assumptions.
Yep.
Not I mean, since we last spoke, the things that we've been thinking about is just, what there's two implementation paths, and it seems like the one thing that has been sort of blocking the chat API, because there is the whole UX and security concerns about doing it to having it as an API to control the status client rather than just an API that dApps can use to get access to Waku. And so, but pursuing the route for dApps to get Waku means we have to find a way to get Waku into the browser. And it seems like the optimal way for that is Waku v2, which is going to use libp2p. But if anyone has an idea of how it can be done now in a safe way, the way Waku exists today, or in the current version of Waku, I mean, we're all ears. Well, it could basically enable, it could be a transport layer for essentially any kind of scaling solution or any layer 2 solution, right? Where one example of such a dApp, which is, I think, the most primitive kind, is just gasless polling or voting, right? Where instead of sending your signed messages to the chain, it's sent to a topic. And right now, there are scaling solutions where you can do it on a side chain, and the messages are aggregated there and then finalized to the chain later on. The only thing is, all these layer 2 constructions, they generally rely on some kind of operator of the server, right? So the theory would be that you could, the problem with that, that's a censorship vector, a centralization vector that could, remove users' privacy because they're just using, because they're not transmitting through a privacy preserving protocol. So if they were able to, the operator can censor their transaction, they can withhold it from being submitted or being included into a proof. So if they replace the operator and just use, say, Waku topics for a poll or for any kind of layer 2 solution to aggregate the messages, now it becomes like a censorship resistant way to do it, and privacy preserving as well. So at this point, you basically can use your imagination to, you can really just look at all the current L2 use cases and how they're being applied and just replace the operator with Waku topics. I don't know if you want me to go, if you have any specific questions about that aspect. Right. And it's almost, maybe a way to think about it is, the reason why we wanted the browser is, I would say, the majority of dApps are currently built for the browser. And maybe one way to think about it is, if we're building, maybe a way to think about this is actually status. You could think of it as is a type of dApp. The chat status as chat is a type of dApp, and it happens to be one of the few dApps that's not built for the web, right? And by creating a API for the client, we're just really creating an API for this dApp, which happens to have a gateway into Waku, but maybe something that's more flexible is just having a library that could run in the browser, so we can enable the other 90% of dApps to be able to get access to the status network. Well, yeah. Well, so last we checked, the response I saw was that it's expected, before year end. I don't know if that's necessarily how long we want to wait to start using some kind of API like this. And that's why we're open to ideas on how we can use the current version of Waku, in the browser today. And an alternative idea we're exploring right now is, so there's 3box, and they started this Ceramic network, which 3box itself uses IPFS for messaging, but Ceramic lets you replace the storage and the transport layer for a different one that you want to use. So you could, we could make like Waku part of that Ceramic alliance, so that it's one of the transport layers you could use. But in that case, we could start building some kind of like for example, governance dApps for status today using Ceramic, which will initially use IPFS to aggregate these messages and so forth. It's not ideal because, there's the privacy preserving aspect of IPFS. I don't think it gives you any guarantees as far as privacy because of the networking, the way its networking works. But it'll at least let us create, let's say, dApps today that on the surface level function, have the same type of functionality. And then later on, when Waku v2 is available, we can integrate it into Ceramic, using this basically the same or similar API, and sort of just swap out, let's say, the layer that we're using for Waku. Right. If we're gonna, let's say, build a voting or governance dApp today for the status community, right? They'll basically just be sending signed messages to IPFS, and it'll be aggregated off of there. But then later on, we can swap that out, and they would be sending it to, say, Waku. I don't know if when people vote, if they necessarily need that level of privacy. In general, if they're signing a message today and they're sending it to Ethereum, chances are they're sending it through Infura. And in my opinion, I've always said it's not clear what information Infura is capturing, but they certainly could see what your IP address is.
Another thing to consider is that, currently the only limitation that we have is that Waku does not, basically the Waku runs on dev peer-to-peer, and that's why it cannot be run on the browser, and that's why we're moving to lib peer-to-peer. But there's nothing that prevents us, writing an adapter that runs on a status server, like and they're using it peer-to-peer that just forwards envelopes, and then you have all the Wacom code on the browser that does the decryption and so on and so forth, but you don't have the connection is handled through peer-to-peer or any other technology really. It doesn't really matter, to be WebSockets. So, like having an adapter from Wacom version 1 to something that lives in the browser, it is possible. I don't think it's technically feasible. Probably the shortest thing, the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, maybe it's worth. I feel like Richard, he's not on this call, but I think Richard and Yuri, they built something like this, but for Whisper.
Right. It's a slightly different. So it was a bit more ambitious. So what they were trying to do is like this thing had no discovery as well in peer-to-peer. So it would just basically like connect to other peers, but we don't really, for these, we probably don't really care much about centralization. This is being decentralized. And so like it would be acceptable to connect to these adapter nodes that are run by stations. So it's a bit less ambitious what we can do.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying maybe a simple way forward is you just create like a library that has some like list of nodes that it can connect to. When you say the adapter library is going to be on the server side, so that are you saying, is it on the server side or the client side in the browser?
So think about it. So basically, essentially, like say that you have a WebSocket connection to a server on status, and like Wacom envelopes are passed through this WebSocket connection, and then your browser will just do the decrypting and so on and so forth, essentially, something like that. And then when you publish through the WebSocket, and then it goes into the Wacom network. Something on those lines.
Yeah, but how much? Yeah, but it sounds sort of like we basically have to create like a JavaScript version of, let's say, Wacom. It just uses, right? We're just changing sort of that transport layer, though. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, I mean, essentially that's what it is. It's basically like an implementation of Wacom that it just uses a different transport. It depends on how long it's going to take Wacom version 2, right? If Wacom version 2 is going to take 6 months, then it might be worth doing it. If it's going to take 2 months, then no.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the next, what the optimal path to take as far as implementation here is. One thing I'll do is I'll reach out to Richard, and see if we can maybe get a simplified version of what they've done in the browser, and maybe think about how much work it would be, and if we have the resources to implement what Andrea was just mentioning. Um, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.